Hello and welcome back to the ILO's Future of Work podcast. I'm Sophie Fisher. In this show, we'll be talking about the care sector and why it is crucial to a future with decent work. Worldwide, it's estimated that around 380 million people work in care sectors. 2/3 of these are women. These numbers are expected to grow, in particular in childcare and in care for the elderly. It follows that there is great potential for the creation of jobs. But the ILO has warned that not only is there a current shortage of care workers, but factors such as low wages, poor working conditions, and a lack of protections and benefits mean that the sector isn't attracting new workers. This potentially sets us up for a global care crisis. Earlier this year, the UN designated the 29th of October as International Care and Support Day. The purpose was to highlight some of these issues and encourage solutions. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to try and do just that. So with me today are Christy Hoffman. Christy is General Secretary of the UNI Global Union. Christy, welcome. As I understand it, UNI is a trade union federation that represents more than 20 million workers in service sectors. Is that correct?
Yes. In 10 sectors of the economy.
Great, okay. And also with us is Laura Adati, who is a maternity protection and work family specialist at the ILO. Laura, welcome to you too, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Sophie.
Let me come back to Christy first of all and talk to us a little bit more about the workers that you represent. I gave a quick sketch at the beginning about conditions in the sector. Would you say that was about right?
Indeed, yes.
So low wages, poor working conditions, a lack of protections and benefits, is that pretty common?
I mean, I think you have to distinguish in terms of the various kinds of care. And let me just be clear in terms of UNI. We represent workers, we're primarily in private sector, and we have some acute care work. But what I'd really like to talk about today is more the problems in long-term care, because I do think that as distinct from acute care, healthcare, that long-term care is where we'll see a huge amount of growth, both in the need for employment, but also where we see the real degradation of conditions. And it's not only low pay and conditions. There is that, of course, but part of that is there's also staffing shortages, which make it very, very hard work. And that's been kind of a circular thing. The worse the conditions, the more the staffing shortages. But we've seen that emerge after the pandemic and during the pandemic for sure in some of these long-term care arrangements. And then the whole skew of non-standard, as you would say at the ILO, arrangements, short-term contracts or temporary agency contracts, even 0 hours contracts in some countries, ranging to complete informality. And then, of course, you see even volunteer work in some really low-income countries. So I think those are the kinds of things that give rise to the poor paying conditions, is also the informality in long-term care and home care in particular. And in nursing homes, where I think you see, some of that is missed sometimes in some of the reporting about long-term care, but the conditions in nursing homes were so shameful during the pandemic, how many nursing home workers died. And the reality for those workers is something that deserves a fair amount of attention, I would argue.
I mean, during the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on the role and the value to society of care workers and, promises and talk about improving conditions. From what you say, that didn't really convert into anything practical?
Well, nothing happens just because they got applause. Unfortunately, I think what's happening in terms of converting into something practical is that these workers are coming together in greater numbers and demanding improvements. And so we've seen strikes, we've seen organizing. Certainly in Switzerland, there was a law passed that raised the minimum wages for care workers to, I think, 20 francs. So there's a little
20
bit,
francs an hour, that would be presumably.
Yes. But there's a little bit of improvement, but not just by the good grace of the employers. It's really been a fight, and across the board, no, there hasn't been this like, oh, we realize care workers are so important, let's increase their wages. Not at all, not at all. And so they're mad, they're fed up, and the staffing shortage becomes more and more acute. Which to some extent drives some improvement in wages. In some of the lower wage occupations, you see a little bump up because there's a labor shortage, and staffing shortage in particular. But for the most part, we need to organize these workers into unions. They need to have collective bargaining. And there needs to be obviously more public investment into care. That's a big part of it. And it all needs to come together as a package, because we can invest in care and deliver bad jobs. And this isn't really what we want. If the agenda is a better world, a better care, but in addition, we want gender equality. And as you point out, these jobs are 2/3 women. I think more than that in domestic and home care. I think it's over 90% women. I might be wrong about that number, but I think, then when we see this as a way to look at, as a lens for gender equality, it's not only about creating good care jobs, but it's also about creating the conditions through which women who do all the unpaid care, or the large majority, can actually enter the labor movement if there are good care options. So it's really part of a complete quilt of here's what we need to do to address gender inequality as well.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this this issue of gender in the care sector, and the fact that it is female dominated. I mean, because there have been other ILO research which has shown that when you have a sector that is female dominated, the wages and the conditions tend to go down, and the inverse happens when you get more men into the sector. The wages and conditions tend to improve. Is this something, do you think, that policies can actually help with?
Well, for sure. I mean, you look at even on the legal front, we just saw a big case brought by our UK affiliate GMB against the differential in pay. Not so much two people working at the same job, but between a care worker and someone with similar skills in a male-dominated occupation. And there was a big lawsuit brought in New Zealand on the same issue, and they won big improvements for care workers on using a legal tool. Now, I don't know if we need to do that everywhere. I think it's a really powerful message. We also see the difference between long-term and acute care. The OECD put out a report showing that the comparable workers would earn 24 euros an hour in acute care to 15 euros an hour in long-term care. So that's even the same worker. Comparable occupations, there's a big difference there as well, I think. But on the gender equality issue, we do see some legal cases pumping up and succeeding, and that actually has the impact of lifting up the wages for care workers. But I think on the policy side, it could be addressed as well. Absolutely. And they're having to do that in New Zealand because the case had such a big impact.
Laura, let me bring you in here because the issue of gender equality in the care sector is also something that you've been looking at, I think.
Yes, and this new International Day for Care and Support really emphasizes the need for the substantial investments in the care economy and to build this care and support system that are robust, resilient, and gender transformative. So gender transformative, it means ensuring that the jobs that are created are of good quality. As we heard from Christy, they need to be formal, they need to be safe, free from violence and harassment. And we know that so many women face and other workers face violence and harassment in care occupations. Also, we need to offer adequate wages and equal pay for work of equal value. So that's extremely important. And offer social and labor protection, training and accreditation. It's not because women are overrepresented in these jobs, that we should not see these jobs as skilled, that need a reward and value.
Right. Now, you've been looking, I think, at care as it relates to childcare, which, of course, is the other major sector. Christy has been talking about long-term elder care and care in homes. So what were the basic things that you found as relating to childcare?
The new brief that has been published in October 23 focuses on the benefits of investing in transformative childcare policies. So when we talk about investing in care and support systems, we're also looking at all those care policies that include maternity, paternity, parental leave, childcare services, long-term care services that are staffed with quality care jobs. At the ILO, we have dedicated our efforts in creating a robust evidence case and an investment case to guide governments, workers, and employers in formulating and financing transformative care policies. We have launched an ILO Care Policy Investment Simulator that is an online tool that helps wishes to empower users to advocate for transformative investments, bringing the arguments that would allow social dialogue around care policies and bring the evidence that these are not costs, are investments, and we need public solutions for tackling the growing care challenges. So the brief highlights that investing in transformative care policy packages could generate almost 300 million jobs by 2035. And when we look specifically at childcare policies, we find that every dollar invested in closing childcare policy gaps could result in an average increase of $3.76 in global GDP by 2035. And we find that these benefits are present everywhere, independent from regional and income diversity. And there are also important gender equality advantages for the simulations based on this new tool show that also women's employment rates could increase from the 2019 average of 46% to a simulated 56% by 35. So important reduction in gender inequality in employment, but also global gender gaps in monthly earnings could be reduced from the 2019 average of 20% to 8% in 2035. So this alone, of course, won't resolve the whole issue of gender inequality in the labor market, but really point to the urgency of prioritizing investments that can really bring meaningful societal transformation.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that for every dollar spent on additional childcare between the ages of when the child is born and when it can start full-time education, for every dollar that is spent on that, the potential economic return is $3.7?
Exactly. Precisely.
And in addition to that, there are benefits of reducing the gender pay gap because you're allowing women to get back into the workforce and increasing the amount of actually women in the workforce.
Exactly. And also creating good quality care jobs It's all the direct jobs.
That's the key, isn't it? It's not just getting the jobs, as they have to be good jobs.
Exactly. They need to be trained jobs. They need to be well-paid jobs. There should be enough workers. What we've heard from Christy is that we're living in some countries, the results of years of underinvestment in care sectors. And in other countries, financing choices that are based on market logics are really creating an exodus of care professionals. Providers are struggling to hire quality trained care professionals, and we all suffer when carers are not recognized and empowered to deliver for our loved ones.
Yeah. Christy, one of the things that Laura has mentioned in what she was saying is not just the creation of jobs, but the creation of good formal jobs, which of course come with protections and of course with paying taxes back to governments. To what extent do you think that in the long-term care sector where your members work, that it's the conditions of the jobs that are as important or even more important than the actual wages themselves?
To what extent are the conditions?
Is it an issue of conditions as much as money?
I think money is really important. I think that the conditions drive the money to some extent. When you were talking about such low wages, really a small difference can be transformative for some low wage workers. So I don't want to take money out of the table, but I do think that when you're not in a formal relationship, when you don't have a standard employment relationship, it's much harder to make more money. So I think, and it's certainly much harder to organize. And when you look at domestic care workers caring for the elderly, the push to formalize those relationships has been really transformative to ensure that those workers are both able to come together in unions because they have an employer. They're able to negotiate higher wages, but also, of course, improve their conditions. And I want to come back to the point about training, because I do think that, it's proven that when we have workers who move out of informality and come into a different kind of an employment relationship, and they are able to get some certification and some upskilling, it really benefits the clients as well as the worker, because the worker has more skills, they're able to negotiate, be in a position to get higher wages, but the client's also getting better care. So I think there's a win-win for everyone, and training is very important as in terms of the care economy. But yes, of course, conditions matter, but pay is absolutely essential. People need a living wage.
Yeah, I think your point about training is well taken, because anybody who has seen a care worker in action will know that it's actually a skilled job. Let me ask you, this International Day of Care and Support that the UN created this year, do you think that's going to be a help? How do you think it's going to affect the industry?
I mean, I think it's terrific that we're having this opportunity to pay attention to these people who are so essential to every one of us who hasn't had a mother or a child who needed care. And I do think that it's important as a moment where we can, do things like we're doing today. We're having a podcast, or we're issuing reports, or we'll be able to celebrate the victories that we've seen over the past year, in particular of workers coming together to negotiate better conditions. But putting a spotlight on these workers who lived for so long in the shadows, we just expect that we're going to be able to find some, migrant worker or low wage worker. There's just sort of, we'll be able to find someone to come in and take care of the grandmother. Actually, the reality is we need to upgrade the industry. We need to put more attention onto it. We need to make sure that all workers in the care sector are getting both a relationship through which they can come together, negotiate good collective agreements, and have decent work all around. And that I agree with the comments Laura's comments about, it's got to be safe work. It has to be regular schedules. Scheduling is really, really difficult for care workers. Often, if you're moving from one client to another, you don't get paid for the time in between. You're spending time with the client. So the travel time, that's a big issue for care workers who are negotiating with their employers, is how to treat that transportation time. But we have seen some really good models emerge. And I know in the ILO's report from last year, you talked about the SEIU and AFSCME, the big project they've done in the state of California to formalize care workers, the home care workers there, and what a transformation that has made for the lives of those many, many thousands of care workers. We've seen this year in the Czech Republic where nursing homes are very, very low, very poorly represented by unions in general, but some of our affiliate got one of the first collective agreements for over 1,500 employees in 32 care homes across the country with substantial wage increases. So this is also we have to celebrate these victories. I mean, the SEIU model, I point that out. That's some time ago, but I think it's a good model that others can follow. I think the Czech Republic example is, important to see these private sector nursing home care workers coming together in countries where unions have very low density, especially in the care industry, and that they were able to come together and create a new model for themselves.
And Laura, just finally, the ILO, as you mentioned, has launched this new Care Policy Investment Simulator and the Care Policy Portal. How do you hope those will be used?
The Care Policy Investment Simulator and Portal are important tools for empowering governments, workers, employers, and other key stakeholders in making informed decisions. So we really have the tools out there. We need the policy commitment, the political commitment of states and workers and employers that have the responsibility to deliver care. So this day really reminds us the importance to invest in our carers.
Great. Thank you, Laura and Christy. Thank you very much for that. It's a good note to leave it on. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in this podcast. Thank you to you both for joining us, and thank you also to you, our listeners, for giving us your time and attention. I hope you will join us again soon for another Future of Work podcast. But for now, goodbye.